Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the debut album from Jess Glynne, titled I Cry When I Laugh. So I think I was one of the few critics who cover pop music who didn't really love Rather Be coming out in 2014, the breakthrough single from electronic music duo Clean Bandit. Yeah, it was a very elegant and very pretty song, had a vibrant clarity to the sound that reminded me a lot of Imogen Heap in a good way, but it was one of those songs emotionally just fell completely flat for me. Maybe it just wasn't weird enough, or it never reached those transcendent moments it kept going for, or maybe because it felt bizarrely overmixed and the songwriting really not being all that great, but I gotta be honest, didn't really do much for me, even though I will admit I understand its appeal. Now, one person I won't blame, though, is Jess Glynne, the guest singer on the track who's actually pretty solid in her own right, and was steadily building herself a respectable career in the UK, while everyone on this side of the Atlantic had no idea who she was. Now, let's make this clear, she's big in the UK right now, with multiple songs cracking the top 10, and even one taking the #1 spot for 3 weeks with Hold My Hand. And considering the turnover in the UK official charts, that is saying something that she's got any sort of longevity. So, who is Jess Glynne? Born in the UK, she grew up working in music management and record labels before a few chance collaborations, the biggest being with Clean Bandit, of course, that netted her a Grammy before she had a full debut album. Reportedly drawing a lot of soul, R&B, and house music, promised to be at least an interesting pop album, so I made a point for myself to check out I Cry When I Laugh when it finally came out. So, how does it turn out? Well, it turned out pretty damn well, but in a way that gives me surprisingly little to say about it. The funny thing is that after a few listens, Jess Glynne's formula for her songs becomes pretty easy to understand that allows her to make some immediately catchy, very breezy pop music that doesn't exactly hit great heights, but doesn't hit a lot of lows either. Now, to her credit, it's a remarkably cohesive and enjoyable formula, but I will say it holds this album back a bit from being a truly great pop record instead of just being a damn good one, which it most certainly is. So okay, what is this formula? Well, the first major ingredient is Jess Glynne herself. Her vocal timbre immediately struck me as somewhat familiar, almost like Rihanna's lower range without her accent, or Pink's without the rough edge fire. There's more elegance and poise and class to Jess Glynne's delivery that's still got the power to bring raw, organic soul to her singing, even if I'd argue she doesn't always have the most distinctive personality. And to her credit, there's very little obvious pitch correction here, instead relying on a surprisingly textured and layered backing choir of male and female vocals that calls back to soul and gospel, adds some power to her choruses. It does mean that there are some moments that probably could have used a little bit more intimacy and restraint, just ease back a little bit, but really a lot of the energy does work to her advantage, and that's mostly because of the instrumentation and the production. Now, if you're familiar at all with Clean Bandit, several of their production hallmarks they appear in this album, a few with even their name attached to the production credits. The fluttery futuristic synths, the waves of elegant strings, the slightly more aggressive upbeat tempo, their crisp beats, and the feeling that it's all a little bit overmixed and overstuffed for its own damn good. And while Jess Glynne never really steps into the more stately era of Baroque pop, she complements the more classical instrumentation with plenty of pianos to flesh out the melody in the lower end of the mix, and even add some horns, some of which do suspiciously sound like presets, if I'm gonna be honest there. And make no mistake, the pianos make this album. The dents playing on the verses of Gave Me Something, the staccato layers that suddenly build on Hold My Hand, the sharp melodic grooves of Ain't Got Too Far to Go and Don't Be So Hard on Yourself, to the stately restraint of Take Me Home, a song that reminds me way too much of Beyonce's Halo, by the way, instrumentally. Now, all this provides the album such a solid melodic foundation that it's almost a little bit exasperating how the other instrumentation can't build off of it more. I mean, sure, the beats are often solid, if a little bit lacking in texture in the low end, but when you throw on horns of varying quality, you throw in some strings, a varied backing chorus, and some shockingly chintzy synthesizers on songs like You Can Find Me and No Rights, No Wrongs, things start to feel a little bit overcooked and overdone. And that's when you have the pianos. When this album tries to go for more bass-heavy, minimalist, modern production, the beats are often good, but the melodies don't tend to rise so much. They tend to be a little bit forgettable, like on the creaking Why Me, or the odd muffled feeling of the blend of instrumentation on It Ain't Right. But then again, this is an album that works best when it's riding that wave of melodic momentum driven by those pianos, enraptured by Jess Glynne's vocals. And as long as you can ride that wave, it is genuinely enjoyable and a lot of fun. Of course, until you start looking into the lyrics themselves. The odd thing is that despite the title, I Cry When I Laugh isn't really a melancholic album, even despite the occasional somber underlying strings, because when there is darkness and pain, Jess Glynne is smart enough to know that pain should be explored and dealt with before moving on. Like on Take Me Home, where she looks for a friend who is going to provide her some solace and comfort, but is also willing to dig a little bit deeper and ask some of the tough questions of her to really dissect the situation. And Ain't Got Too Far to Go takes a similar path, where she's rising above a breakup on her own, and yet admits that she'd go through the same situation again because the experience has made her stronger. Yeah, it's a small detail, but I really did like that. And that's mostly what I liked about the songwriting as a whole. It's still very much lodged in the typical pop template of of love songs, breakup songs, complicated relationships, dance songs, but it's got enough nuance around the edges to be very mature and very likable. For the most part, I get the sentiment behind Sad as Vanilla, and both Jess Glynne and guest vocalist Emile Sandé, they do sell the hell out of it, but it's still about crying into a bowl of ice cream after a breakup, and it felt so schmaltzy rom-com that it just really fell flat for me. But at least there were details there. If I were to highlight my biggest issue with this album, it'd be that the lyrics are oddly lacking in a lot of distinctive, unique detail to them. Sure, we get some fragments, like the berry picking on the intro, but it leaves many of these songs feeling a little bit vague, not giving Jess Glynne more lyrical personality, even despite some solid sentiments that I can get behind. So okay, in the end, what does I Cry When I Laugh deliver here? Well, mostly exactly what it was designed to deliver. Solid as hell pop songs that can remain consistently energetic and enjoyable without faltering, even if it means they can occasionally lack a distinctive artistic force behind them lyrically and instrumentally. All of this makes me wonder if Jess Glynne might be a better fit for fronting the EDM and folktronica that won her that Grammy instead of her own material, but then again, this is a debut. She can flesh out more of that personality on later albums. For me, it's a very light 7 out of 10, and definitely a recommendation if you're looking for some well-composed and energetic piano-driven pop, but otherwise, most of you will be checking out the slightly more enjoyable Carly Rae Jepsen album that finally got wide release and really has grown on me a fair bit, but if you're already getting tired of that, give this a listen. You won't regret it. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.